Thank you, Merci, Eric. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, I'm here to talk to you about Health Canada's authorization of Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine in children 12 to 15 years of age. This is the first vaccine authorized in Canada for the prevention of COVID-19 in children and marks a significant milestone in Canada's fight against the pandemic. Health Canada received Pfizer-BioNTech submission for this expanded indication on April 16th. After completing a thorough and independent scientific review of the evidence, the department determined that this vaccine is safe and effective when used in this younger age group. Health Canada's assessment built upon the previous review of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, where data on both the early studies that were part of the development of the vaccine as well as manufacturing information had already been examined. Scientists reviewed data from an extension of the original large phase 3 study conducted in adults, which included over 2,000 participants between 12 and 15 years of age. The study used the same 2-dose regimen and the same dose of vaccine that has been authorized for use in adults. Participants in the 12 to 5-year age group were all enrolled at sites in the United States. The trial also compared the immune response in this age group and its safety profile to a group of young adults 16 to 25 years of age already participating in the study. Data from the clinical trial showed that the vaccine's efficacy after the second dose in preventing COVID-19 in this younger age group was 100%. There were over 1,000 people in each of the two groups, one that did not receive the vaccine and one that did. In the group that did not receive the vaccine, there were 18 cases of COVID-19, and in the group that received the vaccine, there were 0. The efficacy was also further supported by antibody levels measured in a smaller group of the 12 and 15-year-olds that were comparable to the levels seen in young adults. The safety profile of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in 12 to 15-year-olds is similar to what we saw for older people. That is, the most commonly reported side effects were temporary and mild, like a sore arm, chills, or fever. Health Canada applied its science and evidence-based review process and required that the same high standards were met as with all our vaccine reviews. We also know that millions of people have received the Pfizer vaccine and no new safety issues have been identified. As with all of the vaccines authorized under the interim order, Health Canada has placed terms and conditions on this authorization. These require Pfizer-BioNTech to provide additional information to Health Canada on the safety, efficacy, and quality of the vaccine to ensure that the benefits continue to outweigh its risks as it is given to more people. Health Canada and the Public Health Agency work together with the provinces and territories, as well as the manufacturer and regulators around the world, to constantly monitor the safety of vaccines. We know that the system works to quickly identify even the very rare and unexpected side effects. Although this is the first vaccine authorized for children, other manufacturers of the vaccines authorized in Canada are conducting or planning studies in adolescents and younger children, including children from 6 months to 11 years of age. As soon as we receive these submissions, Health Canada will expedite their review. Since the beginning of the pandemic, approximately 20% of cases of COVID-19 in Canada have been reported in people under the age of 19. While younger people are less likely to experience serious cases of COVID-19, having access to a safe and effective vaccine will help control the disease's spread to their families and friends, some of whom may be at higher risk of complications. It'll also support the return to a more normal life for our children, who have had such a hard time over the past year. In keeping with our commitment to openness and transparency, Health Canada is publishing multiple documents related to this decision, including a revised Canadian product monograph and a high-level summary of the evidence that we reviewed. All of this information can be found at covid-vaccine.canada.ca. Now that we have millions of safe and effective vaccines rolling out across the country, I'm sure people will want to know more about when they will be available, especially for this age group. Our colleagues at the Public Health Agency of Canada will be holding their weekly technical briefing on rollout logistics tomorrow, where they can take some of those questions. Today's authorization is very good news, and we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but until the majority of Canadians are vaccinated, we need to continue to be diligent about following public health guidelines. That means keeping our physical distance, continuing to wear a mask, and washing our hands. Thank you.
Bonjour. Merci d'être des nôtres aujourd'hui.
Good morning.
Thank you for
Je
joining
suis
us
ici
today.
pour vous parler de
I'm here to
l'homologation
talk
par
to
Santé
you
Canada du
about
vaccin contre la
Health Canada's
COVID-19 de
authorization of
Pfizer-BioNTech
Pfizer-BioNTech's
pour une
COVID-19
utilisation chez les
vaccine
enfants de 12 à
in
15 ans.
children 12 to 15
L'autorisation
years
d'un
of
premier
age.
vaccin au Canada pour
This
la
is the
prévention
first
de la
vaccine
COVID-19
authorized in
chez les
Canada for the
enfants
prevention
marque
of
une étape
COVID-19 in
importante dans la
children and
lutte du
marks a
Canada contre la
significant
pandémie.
milestone in Canada's fight
Santé
against the
Canada a
pandemic.
reçu la présentation de
Health Canada
Pfizer-BioNTech
received
relative à cette indication
Pfizer-BioNTech's
supplémentaire le
submission
16
for this
avril.
expanded
Après avoir
indication on
complété un
April
examen
16th.
scientifique rigoureux et
After
indépendant des
completing
données,
a
le
thorough and
ministère a
independent
conclu que
scientific
ce
review of
vaccin
the
est sûr
evidence,
et
the
efficace
department determined
lorsqu'utilisé chez ce groupe
that this
d'âge.
vaccine is safe and
Santé Canada a
effective when
basé en
used in
partie
this
son
younger age
évaluation
group.
sur l'examen
Health
précédent
Canada's
du vaccin de
assessment
Pfizer-BioNTech,
built
au
upon the
cours duquel
previous
les données
review
des
of the
premières études
Pfizer-BioNTech
menées dans le cadre
vaccine,
du développement du
where
vaccin,
data on both
ainsi que
the
les
early
renseignements
studies
sur la
that were part of the
fabrication avaient
development
été
of the
examinés.
vaccine, as well as
Les
manufacturing
scientifiques ont
information,
analysé les
had
nouvelles données
already been
recueillies
examined.
après que le vaste
Scientists
essai clinique
reviewed
initial de
data
phase
from
3
an
mené chez
extension
des
of the
adultes
original
a été
large phase 3
élargi de
study
manière à
conducted
inclure
in
plus de
adults,
2000
which
participants
included
âgés de
over
12 à 15
2,000
ans.
participants
L'essai
between
portait
12
sur
and
le
15
même
years of
schéma à 2
age.
doses et la
The
même
study
dose de vaccin
used the same
que
two-dose
ceux ayant
regimen
été autorisés
and the
pour
same
les
dose of
adultes.
vaccine
Les
that has
participants
been
du groupe d'âge
authorized
de
for
12 à
use in
15 ans
adults.
ont tous été recrutés
Participants in the
dans des
12 to
sites aux
15-year
États-Unis.
age group were all enrolled at sites in
L'essai
the
a
United
également
States.
comparé la réponse
The trial
immunitaire générée
also
par le
compared
vaccin
the immune
et son profil
response in
d'innocuité
this
dans ce
age
groupe
group
d'âge
and
avec les
its safety
résultats d'un
profile
groupe
to a
de
group
jeunes
of young
adultes âgés
adults
de 16 à
16 to
25 ans
25 years
participant
of
déjà à
age
l'essai.
already
Les données
participating
de
in the
l'essai
study.
clinique ont montré
Data
qu'après
from
la
the
deuxième
clinical
dose,
trial showed
l'efficacité de
that the
prévention de la
vaccine's
COVID-19
efficacy
dans cette
after the
tranche
second
d'âge
dose
plus
in
jeune
preventing
était de 100
COVID-19 in this younger age
Chacun
group
des
was
deux groupes à
100%.
l'étude, l'un traité par le vaccin
There
et
were over
l'autre pas,
1,000
comptait
people
plus de
in
1000
each
sujets.
of two groups.
18 cas de
One that did
COVID-19
not
sont
receive the
survenus dans le groupe
vaccine
non
and one that
vacciné,
did. In the
contre
group that
aucun
did
dans
not
le
receive
groupe
the vaccine,
vacciné.
there were 18 cases of
L'efficacité est
COVID-19, and in the
également
group that
appuyée
received the
par les
vaccine,
niveaux
there were
d'anticorps
zero.
mesurés dans
The
un
efficacy
sous-groupe
was
de
also
sujets
further
de
supported
12 à
by
15 ans
antibody levels
qui étaient
measured in a
comparables
smaller
à
group
ceux
of
observés
the
chez
12
les
to
jeunes adultes.
15-year-olds that were
Le profil
comparable to the
d'innocuité
levels
du
seen in
vaccin de
young adults.
Pfizer-BioNTech
The
chez
safety
les
profile
12
of
à
the
15 ans
Pfizer-BioNTech
est
vaccine in
semblable à
12 to
celui observé chez
15-year-olds
les
is
personnes plus
similar to what
âgées,
we saw for
c'est-à-dire que
older
les effets
people.
secondaires les plus
That is,
couramment
the most
signalés
commonly
étaient
reported
temporaires
side
et
effects
légers,
were
comme
temporary
de
and
la douleur
mild,
au bras, des
like a
frissons
sore
et de la
arm,
fièvre.
chills, or
Comme
fever.
tous les examens de vaccins, Santé Canada a
Health
utilisé
Canada
un
applied
processus
its
d'examen
science and
scientifique et basé sur les
evidence-based
faits et
review
a exigé le
process
respect des
and
mêmes normes
required
élevées.
that the same
De
high
plus,
standards were
nous
met
savons que
as
des
with
millions de
all other
personnes ont
vaccine
maintenant reçu le
reviews.
vaccin de
We also
Pfizer
know that
et
millions
qu'aucun
of
nouveau
people have
problème
received
d'innocuité
the
n'a été signalé.
Pfizer vaccine and no
Santé
new
Canada a
safety
sorti cette
issues have been
homologation de
identified.
certaines
As
conditions,
with
comme
all of
cela a
the
été le
vaccines
cas pour tous les
authorized under
vaccins
the interim
homologués au
order,
titre de l'arrêté
Health Canada has
d'urgence.
placed terms and conditions
Pfizer-BioNTech
on this
doit notamment fournir à
authorization.
Santé Canada des
This
renseignements
requires
supplémentaires sur
Pfizer-BioNTech
l'innocuité,
to provide
l'efficacité et la
additional
qualité du vaccin
information to
afin de
Health
garantir
Canada
que
on the
les avantages
safety,
continuent de
efficacy, and
l'emporter sur les
quality of the
mesures, sur les
vaccine
risques à
to
mesure qu'il
ensure
est
its
administré à
benefits
plus de
continue
gens.
to outweigh its
Santé
risks
Canada
as
et
it is
l'Agence de
given
la
to more
santé publique du
people.
Canada
Health
travaillent de
Canada and the
concert avec
Public
les
Health
provinces, les
Agency
territoires,
work
les
together with the
fabricants
provinces
et
and
les organismes de
territories as well as the
réglementation du monde
manufacturer and
entier pour
regulators around
assurer
the
une
world
surveillance
to
constante de l'innocuité
constantly
des vaccins.
monitor the safety of
Nous savons que ce
vaccines.
système
We
fonctionne
know
pour
that this
détecter
system
rapidement les
works
effets
to quickly
secondaires, même très rares
identify
et
even very
inattendus.
rare and unexpected
Même
side
s'il s'agit
effects.
du premier vaccin dont
Although this is
l'utilisation
the
est
first
autorisée chez les
vaccine
enfants,
authorized for
d'autres
children,
fabricants de vaccins
other
homologués au Canada
manufacturers of
mènent
the
ou prévoient
vaccines
mener des
authorized
études
in Canada
chez
are
les adolescents
conducting
et
or
les
planning
enfants, y
studies
compris
in
chez les enfants de
adolescents and
6 mois
younger
à 11
children,
ans.
including children from
Santé
6 months
Canada
to
fera un
11 years of
examen
age.
accéléré dès qu'il
As soon
recevra des
as we
présentations à
receive the
ce sujet.
submissions, Health
Depuis le
Canada
début
will
de la pandémie,
expedite their
environ
review.
20% des cas de
Since the
COVID-19 au
beginning of the
Canada ont
pandemic,
été signalés chez
approximately
les personnes de
20% of
moins de
cases of
19 ans.
COVID-19 in Canada
Bien que
have been
les jeunes
reported
soient
in people
relativement peu
under the age
nombreux
of
à présenter
19,
des effets graves de la
while younger
COVID-19,
people are less likely to
l'accès à des
experience
vaccins
serious
sûrs et
cases of
efficaces contribuera
COVID-19.
à contrôler la
Having access to a
propagation de la
safe and
maladie
effective
au sein de
vaccine will
leur
help to
famille
control the
et auprès
disease's
de leurs
spread to
amis,
their
dont
families and
certains peuvent
friends,
être plus vulnérables
some
aux
of whom may be
complications.
at a higher risk
La
of
vaccination
complications.
appuiera également le retour à une vie plus normale
It
pour
will
nos
also
enfants
support the
qui ont dû
return to a
traverser
more
une
normal normal life
difficile
for our
depuis un
children
an.
who have had such a hard
Pour
time
respecter son
over the
engagement
past
d'ouverture
year.
et de
In
transparence,
keeping with
Santé
our
Canada
commitment
publie
to
plusieurs
openness and
documents en lien avec cette
transparency,
décision,
Health
y
Canada is
compris une
publishing
monographie de
multiple
produits
documents
révisés
related to this
et un
decision,
sommaire des données probantes
including a
examinées.
revised
Tous
product
ces
monograph
renseignements
and a
sont
high-level
disponibles à
summary of the
l'adresse
evidence we reviewed. All this information can be
vaccin-covid.canada.ca.
found at
Maintenant que des millions de vaccins sûrs et efficaces
covidvaccine.canada.ca.
sont déployés
Now
à la
that we
grandeur du
have
pays,
millions of safe
les
and
gens
effective
voudront sans doute
vaccines
savoir
rolling
quand ils
out
seront
across the
disponibles.
country, I'm sure
Nos
people
collègues de
want to know
l'Agence de la
more
santé
about
publique
when
du
they will be
Canada tiendront
available.
demain leur
Our
séance
colleagues
d'information
at the
technique
Public Health
hebdomadaire
Agency of
sur le
Canada will be
déploiement et
holding
la
their weekly
logistique,
technical
durant
briefing
laquelle ils pourront
on
répondre à
rollout and
certaines de ces
logistics
questions.
tomorrow. where they can take some of these questions. Today's authorization is very good news, and we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But until the majority of Canadians are vaccinated, we need to continue to be diligent about following public health guidelines. That means keeping our physical distance, continuing to wear a mask, and washing our hands. Thank you.
Merci, Dr. Bertion. We will now open the phone line to questions. Please remember that we are taking questions in both official languages, and we ask that you limit yourself to one question and only one follow-up. Nous vous demandons de vous limiter à une question et une question suivie, et vous pouvez poser vos questions dans l'une des deux langues officielles. Donc, nous commençons la période de questions. Opérateur, over to you.
Thank you. Merci. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. Please press star 1 at this time to ask a question. Et la première question est de Raymond Filion de TVA.
First question, Raymond Filion, TVA. You have the floor.
Bonjour, Dr.
Thank you.
Juste
Good
une
morning.
précision. Vous avez dit que Pfizer
Clarification.
doit fournir
You
à Santé
said
Canada
Pfizer
des
has to
renseignements
provide
supplémentaires
additional
sur l'innocuité,
information
mais
to
est-ce qu'on
Health
doit comprendre
Canada
que le vaccin
on
peut
safety.
être administré
Should we
dès
take it
maintenant
that the
aux
vaccine
adolescents
can
au
now
Canada,
be
ou on doit
administered
attendre?
right here in Canada, or should we wait?
Non, l'autorisation est effective dès
The
maintenant,
authorization
donc
is
il est
effective
possible
as of now, so
d'administrer
it's
le
possible
vaccin
to administer
Pfizer au
the
Canada
Pfizer vaccine in
aux
Canada
adolescents de 12 à
to
15 ans à partir de maintenant.
adolescents 12 to 15 years old.
Très bien.
As of
J'aimerais
now.
aussi vous entendre au sujet de la
Question. I would
confusion
like
des derniers
to
jours.
hear you
Selon
about the
vous, le Santé
confusion,
Canada,
the
est-ce
recent
qu'il est
confusion.
préférable que les gens
According
patientent
to
pour
Health
recevoir un
Canada, is it
vaccin
better for
ARN
people to be
messager,
patient and
ou il est
receive an
préférable que ces personnes
mRNA
reçoivent un
vaccine,
vaccin à
or
vecteur
is it
viral
preferable
si
to
c'est celui qui leur est offert en premier?
receive a viral vector vaccine if that's the one that's
Santé
available to
Canada a
them?
autorisé
Answer.
4
Health
vaccins
Canada
pour
has
utilisation
authorized
contre la
4
COVID-19 au
vaccines
Canada.
for local
Comme vous le
use
savez, il
against
y a 2 vaccins
COVID-19. As
ARN
you know,
messagers puis 2
there are
vaccins à
2
vecteur viral, les vaccins
mRNA vaccines
d'AstraZeneca
and
et de Janssen.
2 other ones,
Les vaccins
AstraZeneca and
à vecteur
Janssen.
viral
The viral
d'AstraZeneca et de
vector
Janssen présentent un
AstraZeneca and
risque
Janssen
d'un effet
vaccine
secondaire très rare qu'on
have
appelle
some
la
very rare secondary side
thrombostose avec
effects,
thrombocytopénie ou un bas
thrombosis
niveau de plaquettes. Donc, c'est des
with low
caillots très rares qui ont
platelets.
été
These are very
signalés.
rare
Ces
side effects
cas-là
that have been
surviennent
reported,
environ,
and this
on estime à une
happen
fréquence d'environ 1 sur 100 000.
at a frequency of
Puis, sur la
about
base de
1
données
out
qu'on
of
a de l'Europe
100,000. So
et
from
de
the
du
databases we
Royaume-Uni.
have in the
Donc, les
EU
gens sont
and
informés de
Europe,
ça. On
people are
a
informed.
communiqué cette
The
information dans la
information
monographie
has
du
been
produit.
communicated in the
Il
product
faut prendre
monograph.
puis c'est sûr que les vaccins d'ARN messager n'ont
It's
pas eu
true
cet
that
effet
the
secondaire indésirable
mRNA
qui a été
vaccine
rapporté.
have
Mais par
not
ailleurs,
had
il faut
similar side
garder en
effects,
tête
but
que
at the
les
same
vaccins
time,
sont là pour
let's
combattre
bear in
la
mind that the vaccines are
COVID-19.
there to
Le
help
risque
fight
d'attraper la
COVID-19,
COVID-19,
and
il
the
reste
risk
quand même
of
très
contracting
présent dans plusieurs
COVID-19
parties
is still
du
very
pays.
present in
Puis
many
le
parts
fait
of the
de
country.
retarder la
Delaying
vaccination comporte aussi des risques.
vaccination
Alors,
also
c'est sûr
entails some
qu'on peut
risks.
regarder le risque du vaccin, comparer les
Of
risques des
course,
vaccins,
we
mais il
can
faut
look
aussi
at the
penser à
risk
c'est
of
quoi
various
le risque
vaccines and
de
compare the
ne pas me
risks.
faire
But
vacciner puis
what
d'attendre
we need to look
4,
at is
6,
the
8
risk
semaines, des
of
fois plus, puis
waiting
tout en
8
gardant aussi
weeks
en
or
tête
more
qu'une fois
to
qu'on
be
est
vaccinated.
vacciné, ça prend 3
Bearing
à 4
in mind
semaines
that
avant
when we
qu'on
are
ait une
vaccinated,
immunité
it takes 3 to 4 weeks
effective
for
du
us to
vaccin. Donc,
develop
il faut
effective
garder tout ça en
immunity
tête. Donc,
against
dans les régions où il y a un haut
the
taux
disease.
de transmission de la COVID-19, l'ensemble des vaccins
Looking at the
offerts
rate of
devraient être
transmission,
considérés comme des options
all available
qui ont
vaccines
plus
should
de
be
bénéfices que de risques
considered
pour les
as
Canadiens pour
options
prévenir la
that
maladie de la
have benefits that
COVID-19.
outweigh the risk when it
Juste
comes to
hier,
the
là, il y a
fight against
56 décès qui
COVID-19.
sont
I know
survenus au
that
Canada de la
56
COVID-19. Alors, c'est un
deaths,
risque qui reste réel. Dans la
lots
dernière
of
semaine, il y a
people have died.
333 Canadiens qui sont décédés de la COVID-19. Donc, la menace, le risque de COVID-19 et le risque d'attraper la maladie et d'en décéder reste dans nos communautés à travers le pays
Canadians have
présent.
died, and this
Puis
remains
ça, on vous offre
a
un
risk
vaccin
we
qui
need to
permet de
take into
prévenir ça,
account
de vous protéger, de
this
protéger
issue.
votre
So
communauté,
if you are
votre
offered
famille.
a vaccine
Je
that will
pense que les
protect
Canadiens
you, your
devraient
family, and your
considérer l'ensemble
community,
des options
Canadians
qui peuvent
should
leur
look
être
into
offertes.
all the options that are available to them.
Merci, Dr. Bertion.
Thank you, Dr. Bertion.
Merci, thank you. The next question is from Mia Rabson of the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi there. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what this might mean for schools reopening and what we know about the application or the chances that kids younger than 12 will have the vaccine approved anytime soon.
Thanks, Mia, for the question. So I'll answer the second part of that first. So for Pfizer does have ongoing trials in younger age groups as well. They've signaled that they may be giving Health Canada a submission for the younger age group, so 5 to 11, as soon as September. So we'll have to wait to see what the timing of that would be. And then, of course, as with all the reviews, we would have to go through the data to see if it actually meets the standards of being authorized. We know that Moderna also has clinical trials underway for those same age groups. And again, we don't have specific timing on when we would receive those submissions, but we may be getting those in the next few months. So that's just on the timing for the younger age groups. And then, the role of Health Canada is to really look at these vaccines to see if they meet those standards for use, so that they can be approved, that the benefits outweigh the risks. And the use of those vaccines really is dependent on the provinces and territories that need to look at their own demographics, their priority groups, and how they use the supply. So it really would depend on the provinces and territories about when the availability would be there for the younger age groups, and then what implications that would have with respect to school opening. Just to say, though, that we do know that COVID is milder and less frequent in children, but it is not zero. We have had cases, tragically, of young children and teens that have died as a result of COVID-19. There's also other syndromes, inflammatory syndromes, that are rare but can be associated with even mild infection. And we're also seeing, we're getting more and more information about vaccine's ability to also block transmission. And so, it's not just the individuals that get vaccinated where that might help, but also, prevent that transmission to potentially other people in the family and in the community. So schools, I think, are one part of it, but there's also the overall benefits and risks of vaccines and vaccination in younger age groups as well to consider.
Vaccines and whether people should wait. I know that Dr. Berthiaume was just discussing that, but do you think that there are preferred vaccines? Do you think the mRNA vaccines are better? And do you think that if someone is at low risk of getting COVID, they should wait to get an mRNA vaccine?
Right. So, first of all, the decision to be vaccinated and when to be vaccinated is a deeply personal one. So our role at the federal level, whether it's Health Canada or anywhere else, is to really provide accurate and consistent information for people to make those decisions. And so in order to do that, I think it's helpful just to step back a little bit and say that, when we're looking at these vaccines, we have 4 vaccines that have been authorized by Health Canada, 3 of which are in use in Canada at this time. And we've always said that it's difficult to compare them. So in terms of their effectiveness, you can't really compare one vaccine to another without doing a clinical trial, which we call a head-to-head trial. But we do know that all of the vaccines are very effective at preventing COVID-19 where it matters most, and that's in patients and people that have, prevention of severe disease, hospitalization, and death. So on the effectiveness side, we know that all of the vaccines do a very, very good job in that sort of prevention. We also know that for the viral vector vaccine, so for AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, that there is this extremely rare risk of these clotting events. Now, I don't want to minimize those. They are real, but we have to put that in context. Those are rare, and we can diagnose those conditions, and we can treat them. But that's something that needs to be taken into consideration as well, and those are on the benefits and the risk side. The other part that's very important is the context. So depending on where you are, in most parts of Canada, we're in the midst of the third wave. So the incidence of COVID-19 is high in a lot of places, in the vast majority of places. So we actually have to look not only at the risks and benefits of vaccination, but the risks and benefits of not being vaccinated. And so, if you have the choice in front of you and you've got 2 vaccines, absolutely, there may be an advantage to choosing an mRNA vaccine because of this avoidance of this rare risk. But in a lot of cases, you may not have that ability. So you have to really weigh the risk of getting vaccinated now with the vaccine. And again, those vaccines are very good in terms of prevention of serious illness and death versus the risk of potentially getting COVID-19. And as Dr. Berthiaume mentioned when he responded to the question, yesterday alone we had 56 individuals tragically lost to COVID-19 in Canada. So the reason that I'm going through all of this is because all of this is important in people making those decisions. You have to look at the benefits, you have to look at the risks, and you have to look at the context. So even in areas where the risk is low and you think that you are not at a high risk of going out, if you're homebound, for example, we also know that that risk can change very quickly. So the risk of COVID-19 in the community. And we know that when you get the vaccine, your immunity doesn't start right away. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks to develop. So what we're saying is that you have to look at all of those things when you're making your decision. But again, when we're talking about the effectiveness of these vaccines, they're all very, very effective. What I say is that if your life is in danger and you need to call 911 to get help to save your life, it does not matter if that call is made on an iPhone or a Samsung or even a flip phone. It does what it is supposed to do. So I think, we really need to equip Canadians with as much information so that they can take those into consideration when they're making their decisions about vaccination and getting vaccinated. And we know that vaccination is such a key tool for us in this fight against COVID-19 and getting us closer to some sense of normality that we're missing so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. We'll move to the next question. Prochaine question, opérateur.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question est de Boris Proux. Le Devoir, la parole est à vous.
Next question, Boris Proux, Le Devoir.
Bonjour,
Good morning.
je viens tout juste d'entendre la réponse précédente
et
puis
the answer
je
given
comprends que c'est
before,
votre ligne depuis
and
le
I
début, que
understand
vous
that
dites que
has
même
been
si les
your
risques
line
sont bas
from the
de la
very
COVID-19
beginning,
dans certaines
even
régions, ça
if
peut changer très
the risk
rapidement.
of COVID is low in some
Malheureusement,
regions,
c'est
things
pas
can
du tout
change
ce qu'on
very
a entendu
quickly.
hier
But
de
that's not
l'Agence de
what
la
we
santé
heard
publique du
yesterday
Canada
from the
qui
Public Health Agency of Canada,
s'en remettait finalement aux avis
which was
des autorités de santé publique
following
locales
the
pour dire
advice of
qu'en
local
effet, dans
public
certaines
health
régions, il y a
authorities, saying that in some regions,
un calcul différent à
the
faire
calculations
au
may be
choix d'attendre
different
ou non
when
le vaccin
looking
préféré.
at the
Je
choice
voudrais
of
savoir si
preferred
vous,
vaccine.
M. Berthiaume, si vous
I would
avez
like to
juste une
know
pensée sur
if
est-ce que vous
you
travaillez en
have
équipe avec
any
l'Agence de
ideas
santé
about
publique
it.
du Canada? Est-ce
Are
qu'il y
you
a un
working
message qui
as a
peut
team with the Public Health Agency
provenir
of Canada?
finalement
Is
des
there a
différentes
single
agences de santé
message
publique du
that
Canada?
we could receive from all the various public health agencies?
Certainement.
Answer.
Oui, on travaille en
Of course,
collaboration
we
avec
work
l'Agence de santé
in
publique
collaboration
du
with the
Canada, qui
Public
travaille en
Health Agency of
collaboration avec
Canada,
les
which works in
différents
collaboration
départements de santé
with the
publique
various
provinciaux
public health
et
agencies in the
territoriaux.
provinces and
Ce qu'il faut
territories.
comprendre, c'est
What we need
que
to
Santé Canada,
understand is
l'Agence de
that
santé publique
public
et
health,
les
Health
autorités
Canada and the
provinciales ont des
Public Health
rôles
Agency
un peu
and the
différents et
provincial
complémentaires.
authorities
Alors, le
have
rôle de Santé
different
Canada,
and
c'est d'approuver
complementary
et de mettre
roles.
à la disponibilité
Health Canada's role is to approve and make
des
available
provinces et des territoires des produits sûrs et efficaces pour
safe and
combattre la COVID-19.
effective
Alors, c'est ce que
products
Santé
to the
Canada a
provinces
fait.
and
Il y a 4
territories.
vaccins qui sont
And that is what
actuellement
has been done.
disponibles.
4 vaccines are
Ensuite,
now
il y
available.
a un comité consultatif,
There's a
comité consultatif
there's a
national en immunisation qui
national
émet des recommandations pour
consult
considération par la santé
advisory
publique.
committee
Puis
on immunization that
national et
also provides
provincial. Puis ultimement,
advice
c'est
to
les
the
provinces qui
federal and
décident.
provincial authorities.
Voici
Ultimately, it's the
le
provinces that
portfolio de
decide
vaccins qui sont
on
disponibles
the
pour mes besoins à moi,
vaccine
compte tenu
portfolio that they
dans le fond,
choose depending on
des risques
needs
de COVID dans ma
and
population,
COVID
des tranches
risks
d'âge que j'ai à
within
vacciner,
specific
comment je peux
populations and age
optimiser ou
groups.
utiliser ces
How
vaccins-là.
should those vaccines be
Santé
optimized?
Canada met les
Health
vaccins à
Canada makes
disposition. On
available
continue de dire que c'est des
vaccines.
vaccins,
We will
l'ensemble des
continue
vaccins
saying
disponibles
that
sont
all
sûrs et
available
efficaces. C'est
vaccines
sûr
are
qu'ils ont
safe
chacun
and
des
effective. Of
propriétés
course, they have
spécifiques, mais globalement, ce
specific
sont tous
properties,
d'excellents
but
vaccins.
ultimately they
Puis
are all
ensuite,
excellent
les
vaccines.
provinces peuvent
And
décider
then
comment ils
the
les déploient au
provinces may
niveau de leur
decide
territoire.
how those vaccines
C'est
should be
sûr
rolled out on
qu'individuellement,
their territories.
les
Of
gens
course,
peuvent...
individually,
Bon, il y a différentes informations qui ont
there's
circulé.
different
Ça peut
information
être
that
des
has
fois un peu
circulated.
difficile de
Sometimes it may
savoir
be
qu'est-ce
difficult
qu'ils doivent
to
faire. Je
know
pense que
what
la meilleure
people
chose, c'est
should
de se
do.
fier,
The
dans le fond, aux
best thing
décisions qui sont
is
prises
to
au niveau
rely on the decisions that
de
are
chaque province, de
taken
chaque territoire.
at the level of each
Puis s'ils
province
sont
and
vraiment
territory.
confus, ils peuvent aussi en
If
parler
they are
avec le pharmacien ou
confused,
leur
they could
médecin pour
talk to
expliquer un petit
their
peu les risques et
pharmacist
bénéfices
or
de
doctor
ces
so that
différents
the
produits-là.
benefits and risks
Mais
of a
pour ce qui est
specific
de Santé
product can be
Canada, c'est des
explained.
produits qui offrent des avantages, beaucoup plus que
For Health
d'inconvénients.
Canada,
Ils sont
these are
disponibles.
products that offer more benefits
Puis,
than risks, and
quand
they
on
are
regarde le
available.
risque de
When
contracter
we
la
look at the
COVID-19
risk of
versus le risque
contracting
de prendre ces
COVID-19
produits-là, ça
versus the
risque
risk
des
of taking
risques
those
relativement
products,
rares
these are
par
very
rapport aux
rare risks
complications,
when
que ce soit
compared to
d'hospitalisation, de décès ou même
complications that
de
may
COVID long
lead
et
to
de transmission aux
hospitalization
proches qu'on voit avec la COVID-19.
long
Alors,
COVID.
en tenant tout ça en ligne de compte, ce sont des vaccins, y compris les vaccins à vecteur viral, qui sont utiles au Canada
all these vaccines,
pour aider
including
à
viral
combattre
vector
la pandémie de
vaccines,
la
are very
COVID-19.
useful in
Maintenant, s'il y a
Canada
un
to
endroit
help
où il y
us
a
fight
très peu de
COVID-19.
cas,
But now, if there's a place
les
where there are
autorités de
very
santé
low,
publique peuvent
there's a very
décider
low number of
qu'ils priorisent
cases,
l'utilisation d'autres types de vaccins. Ça, c'est
other vaccines
totalement dans leur
may be given
prérogative de faire
priority,
ça.
but the provinces have the prerogative to do that.
Initial qu'il y a des études
Follow-up question.
qui sont aussi faites pour autoriser
Studies
l'utilisation
have
d'autres
been
types de
done
vaccins
to
pour
authorize
des
other
jeunes
types
enfants.
of
On parle de 6
vaccines
mois à
for
11
young
ans.
children. You're talking
Pouvez-vous
about
juste me
children
faire
6 months to 11 years.
un petit
Could you
portrait
please tell us
quel genre du catalogue finalement qui est en train d'être étudié par Santé Canada pour les enfants?
what is being studied by Health Canada for use in children right now?
C'est-à-dire que Santé Canada travaille avec les fabricants de vaccins là, pour voir quand est-ce qu'ils peuvent nous soumettre des données là-dessus. Mais actuellement, maintenant, on a l'utilisation du Pfizer là, qui a été approuvé pour les 12 à 15 ans. Pfizer travaille sur une étude aussi pour les enfants de 5 à 11 ans.
They're also working on
résultats
something for children between children who
who
are younger, and results should be available soon. And there will also be a study for those between 6 months to 5 years, but we do not have a specific calendar or schedule for obtaining those results. As for the Moderna vaccine, another mRNA vaccine, studies are underway for use in children between 12 to 15 years. So we will be receiving results soon. There will also be studies for those between 6 months to 12 years, but results should be expected by 2023. There have been some clinical studies on other vaccines, Johnson & Johnson, that has been placed on pause right now, but for vaccines, for which studies are undergoing, and these are Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Thank you, Dr. Berthiaume. Next question.
Merci, thank you. The next question is from Mike Lécouteur of Global News. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for taking our questions. I just wanted to know if you can say what kind of an impact this will have on the percentage of Canadians, how many more Canadians will be eligible for vaccines. And now that we are looking at getting adolescents vaccinated, how do those numbers bring us closer to a possible herd immunity?
Dr. Sharma, you're on mute, I think. Thank you. I clicked it. So with respect to herd immunity, I think, every vaccination that we have gets us closer to having a greater percentage of the population vaccinated. Certainly, if we just look at the adult population, we are relying on people to step up and get vaccinated as soon as possible. And that is really the bulk of the individuals in Canada. The estimates for the ages of 12 to 15 in terms of the population, I don't have those with me at the moment. But they are, I think, Dr. Berthiaume, I'm not sure if we have them as well, but they are closer to, they're obviously smaller numbers. But again, those are important because of, as we said, potential risks for themselves and for transmission, and then, of course, back into other activities and schools. So, it's important to focus on all the different populations. And again, the more people that are vaccinated, the closer we get to potentially, stopping the transmission of the vaccine. It's not just on the numbers of people that are transmitted. It's, of course, also on the numbers of cases of COVID that we have. And then that also, really calls to the importance of the public health measures that we have as well.
Just as a follow-up, I wanted to know, because we're hearing reports that Canada is apparently conducting its own study about vaccine mixing with results expected next week. Do you have any more details on that? Who's part of the study? How big it is?
Right. So we right now we don't have any trials in Canada for vaccine mixing. And so vaccine mixing would be one type of vaccine for the first dose and another type for the second dose. For the ones that we have authorized and in development, that would most likely be an mRNA vaccine like a Pfizer and Moderna combined with an AstraZeneca, which is like a viral vector vaccine. So we have heard that there is a site in Canada that is looking towards potentially starting that clinical trial, but that submission for that mixed dose schedule has not yet been received. So as soon as we receive it, we will review it and authorize it if it does meet the criteria. We do know that in the United Kingdom, there is a trial that's ongoing involving this type of mechanism, so mixing the schedules, and very anxious to see the results of that, which we expect to be coming out in the next month or so.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Prochaine question, opérateur.
Merci, thank you. La prochaine question est de Catherine Lévesque, La Presse canadienne.
Next
La parole est à vous.
La Presse canadienne, Catherine Lévesque.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Bonjour à vous deux.
Good morning to you
sur le
too.
vaccin,
I have a question about the Johnson vaccine.
Les vérifications de Santé Canada sur les 300
How
000
far
doses
has Health Canada gone with the 300 doses that were withheld last week? What is Health Canada's position on that?
Certainement.
Answer.
Donc, le vaccin Johnson, les 300 000 doses actuellement au Canada font partie d'un lot.
100,000 doses now in
Santé
Canada
fait des analyses puis une
being
investigation
analyzed
actuellement
and investigated
pour ce qui
by
est dans le
Health
fond
Canada.
de la fabrication puis
We're looking into the
des
manufacturing,
ingrédients actifs qui sont
the
rentrés dans la
active ingredients
fabrication
that
de
were
ce
used in
lot-là.
manufacturing
Comme vous le
these
savez, là,
lot of
probablement,
vaccines. As you know,
l'ingrédient actif
the active
venait
ingredient
d'une usine au
came from
Maryland
a
où il y avait
factory in
fabrication à la
Maryland
fois du vaccin
where
d'AstraZeneca
the
et du vaccin
AstraZeneca
Johnson.
vaccine and
Alors,
the
Santé Canada
Johnson
veut
vaccines were both being
de
manufactured.
l'intégrité des processus de
So we are
fabrication, de la
studying the
qualité de la
integrity
fabrication
of
du
the
produit. Donc, on a
processes,
demandé
the
des
quality of the
données
product. So
aux
we've asked
manufacturiers. On est en
for
train de les
data from the
analyser. On devrait
manufacturers, which we
avoir
are
là,
now analyzing.
des
We
recommandations ou
should
des
be
conclusions dans les prochains jours.
recommendations
Puis
in
de
the
ça,
coming
va
days.
éventuellement là,
And from
décider
then,
qu'est-ce qui va arriver
we
avec
will take a
ce
decision
lot-là
on what should
du vaccin de
happen
Johnson qui est
to those
actuellement au Canada.
vaccines
Donc, on travaille là-dessus
that are now in
activement.
Canada.
C'est
We
sûr
are
que je
working
dois
hard
quand
on that.
même
Of
là,
course,
juste spécifier que
let me
le lot en question ne sera
clarify
pas distribué au Canada s'il y a
that
quelques doutes que ce soit quant à la qualité
these
du
vaccines
produit
would not be distributed in Canada
de
for
ce
as long
vaccin-là.
as there's any doubt still reigning on that consignment of vaccines.
OK, merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Je voulais aussi revenir sur
Follow-up question.
la recommandation
Let me
du
come
PCNI.
back
Je sais que plusieurs de mes
to
collègues
the
ont déjà posé une
recommendation. I know
question
many of my colleagues
là-dessus, mais
asked a question on
je
that
pense qu'on aimerait
already.
savoir,
We would
et
like
que
to
vous pourriez
know,
peut-être clarifier,
and
c'est
maybe you
est-ce que
can
vous êtes prêt
clarify,
à Santé Canada à dire aujourd'hui,
is Health Canada
prenez
ready to
le
say
premier vaccin
today
qui vous est
to
offert,
people to
même
take
s'il
the
s'agit
first
d'un
vaccine that
Samsung,
is
même s'il
offered,
s'agit du dernier
even
iPhone,
if
finalement,
it
parce
is
que c'est la
Samsung or the
recommandation qu'on
last
entend depuis les
iPhone,
dernières
because that's the
semaines et puis les derniers mois.
recommendation
Donc,
we've
est-ce
been
que
hearing
c'est
over the past
toujours
few
le
weeks and
message là, que
months.
vous avez
It's
aujourd'hui?
the same message you have today.
Écoutez, je pense que le
Answer.
message aujourd'hui,
I
c'est
think
qu'il
our
y a 4
message
vaccins
today is
disponibles au
that there
Canada,
are
dont
4
3 sont
vaccines
distribués
available.
actuellement.
3
Ce
of
sont
them are
tous
being
des vaccins
distributed.
qui offrent des
All are
avantages
vaccines
réels
that offer
pour
real
prévenir
benefits
la
to
COVID-19.
prevent
Je pense que les
COVID-19.
gens doivent
I think
s'informer, dans le
people
fond,
need
de c'est
to
quoi leur propre
get
question,
informed,
questionnement, inquiétude par
ask their
rapport au
own
vaccin et à la
questions
COVID-19,
about
prendre
the
une
various
décision.
COVID
Je pense que
vaccines,
la
and then take a
décision qu'ils
decision.
prennent, par exemple, devrait
The
tenir compte
decision
non
they
seulement de
take
leur
should
risque
take
à
into
eux, mais
account not
aussi
only the
du risque
risks,
de contaminer
but
leurs
also
proches,
the
puis de
risk
l'impact
of
aussi sur la
contaminating
communauté.
loved
Si on
ones
prend, par
and the
exemple,
community.
la
Let's take,
Grande-Bretagne,
for
où il y a
example,
eu
Great
22 millions
Britain,
de doses
where there
d'AstraZeneca
were
qui ont été
22 million
distribuées,
doses of the AstraZeneca
ça leur a
vaccine
quand même permis
distributed.
de prendre le contrôle sur la
This
pandémie.
enabled them
Le principal variant qui est
control the situation of the
actuellement en
pandemic.
circulation au Canada, le variant britannique,
We have
était
the
très prévalent,
British
évidemment, en
variant was
Angleterre,
very
lorsque le
prevalent
vaccin d'AstraZeneca a
in
permis là,
Great
de
Britain, and
contrôler
the
la maladie. Donc,
AstraZeneca vaccine helped
l'utilisation
them
des vaccins,
to
dont celui
prevent the spread of that
d'AstraZeneca, a permis
vaccine.
à la
The
Grande-Bretagne
AstraZeneca
de
vaccine
réouvrir certaines de
enabled
ses
Great Britain
activités, de
to
retourner
reopen some
à
of
une
its
vie plus
activities
normale.
and to get back
Puis
to
la même
a
chose
somewhat
s'applique au
normal
Canada.
life. The
Donc,
same thing
collectivement,
applies to
il y
Canada.
a des grands bienfaits à être
Collectively, there
vacciné
are great
par
benefits benefits to vaccination, irrespective of the type of vaccine we choose from amongst the 3 or 4 available in Canada. It becomes a matter of individual choice. People should understand that, well, if they are waiting for an mRNA vaccine instead of taking the AstraZeneca vaccine, there's a risk of getting COVID-19. So let's not only compare the risk between the vaccines. We need to look at the risk of taking the vaccine or the risk of waiting for another vaccine. And as we said, it takes 3 to 4 weeks before we develop full immunity from the vaccine. So what I'll tell people is that any vaccine is better than none. If you have any concerns, discuss them with your healthcare professional. But overall, for most regions in Canada, the AstraZeneca vaccine is offering more benefits than risks when it comes to protecting people and the community against COVID-19.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Next question.
Merci, thank you. The next question is from Annie Bergeron-Oliver of CTV National News. Please go ahead.
Hi, sorry to go back on this, but my question is for Dr. Sharma. On April 14th, you were quoted as saying, get whatever vaccine is available to you. It's that simple. The longer you wait to get vaccinated, the longer you're not protected. Why has that message changed?
So that, from our perspective, I don't think that message has changed. So what we're saying is that by the time you have a vaccine offered to you, it has already gone through Health Canada review. So, and we've determined that it can be used in Canada, that it's safe and effective for the population that we've approved it for. We have the recommendations from NACI. We have the provinces and territories that have received their allocation, their supply of vaccines. They've looked at their demographics in their province and territory. They've looked at what's happening with COVID-19 there, and they've made decisions about which populations should be prioritized, who should be offered what vaccine. So, you know, if a vaccine is offered to you, it is a good option. And we're always looking at the benefits of a vaccine compared to the risks of that vaccine, but also you have to look at what would happen if you don't get vaccinated. So the benefits and risks of not getting vaccinated or of waiting for another vaccine. So that's always been the case. We've always said we have to weigh those benefits and risks. We now have more information about the vaccines. We have more information about the benefits, about the real world benefits from the vaccine. So AstraZeneca, for example, is a vaccine that's been used widely in the UK and has really been, you know, one of the key reasons that they have their pandemic under control and are starting to open up. So we know that they're effective at controlling COVID-19. There are risks associated with them as well, especially with the viral vector vaccines that we have to take into consideration. But those are very small. They're very real. They can be serious, but they're very small. And so we always have to weigh those risks against the risks of potentially getting COVID-19. So, you know, we still say that if you, you know, your best choice is to protect yourselves by getting vaccinated, by protecting, that helps protect your family, your community. It helps us get to a place where we will have a, you know, more control over COVID-19. And so when you're offered a vaccine, then that is a really, really good option. What now we're also saying is that if you have that option in front of you, and you have to also take into consideration that context, you know, where are you in the country? How much COVID-19 is there? What is your personal risk? And you have to weigh that decision, and you have to be comfortable with that decision. We don't want to force anyone to get vaccinated at a certain time. We don't want to make those decisions for them. What we're saying is that you need to have as much information at your disposal to be able to feel comfortable with the decision that you're making. So for people that have taken the AstraZeneca vaccine, I want to say thank you to them, because they've taken steps to protect themselves, to protect their families, and to protect the community, being aware of the potential risks as well. We have 4 vaccines authorized in Canada, 3 that are being used. They are all very, very effective in combating COVID-19, serious infections, hospitalizations, and deaths.
Thank you for that answer. My follow-up is sort of a two-part question. One, what exactly is the risk right now for AstraZeneca and the VITT? And the second part is that there are at least 1.7 million Canadians who have now received one dose of AstraZeneca. We talk a lot about the risks associated with the rare blood clots after the first dose, but these 1.7 million Canadians now have to get a second dose in the coming weeks. So what is the risk as well after a second dose? Is it the same? And can you provide any context on that second dose risk for people who are waiting to get their second AstraZeneca shot?
Right. So in terms of the risk of this vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia, so related to the vaccine, unusual blood clots, very rare, associated with low platelets. The estimates of risk that we have, and this is based on international information, especially from the UK, when they've delivered 22 million doses, is that we have an estimated risk of about 1 in 100,000. And that changes as we have more information, but that has been pretty steady at about 1 in 100,000 for the last while. So and in terms of deaths due to VIT, the estimates that we're using is approximately 20% of the cases may result in deaths. But what's really important to note about these is that it's something that can be diagnosed and can be treated. So for people that have had AstraZeneca, if you are in that time period, so 4 days to 28 days, there are symptoms that you can make sure that you're watching out for. And if you have those symptoms, we're encouraging people to make sure that they get seen so that if they do have this rare event, they can be diagnosed and treated. We have less information about second doses. So again, from the UK, we have about 22 million doses that have been delivered, but we have only about 1.1 million doses of second doses that have been delivered for AstraZeneca and been administered. And out of those 4.4 million doses, there have been 4 cases of VIT. So 4 cases of VIT with second doses on 4.4 million doses, so about 1 in a million. But again, that's the information that we have from the UK. So what we're saying now is with respect to AstraZeneca, we still say that if you've had 1 dose of AstraZeneca, unless you have had this very rare clotting event, or if you had an allergic reaction to it, then you would go ahead and get your second dose of AstraZeneca. But we also are aware that there are trials going on looking at potentially mixed doses. So 1 dose of a viral vector vaccine and 1 dose of mRNA. So what I would say for people that have had 1 dose of AstraZeneca, that plan to get your second dose when that is available, but stay tuned for information from other clinical trials that might change those recommendations. If we get information to say that you might even have a better immune response and no increased risk on the safety side from those studies that are ongoing.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you, merci. La prochaine question est de Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada.
Next question, Laurence Martin, Radio-Canada.
Oui, bonjour, Dr. Version.
Good morning, Dr. Bertion.
AstraZeneca.
Let me come back to AstraZeneca to seek clarification. In regions where there's no high transmission rate, in your opinion, according to Health Canada, should people wait for the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine instead of taking AstraZeneca?
Donc, la question, c'est dans une région où il y a une faible incidence du COVID, est-ce que l'AstraZeneca est un bon choix? Je pense que ça reste pas un mauvais choix. Je pense que ça peut quand même être considéré. Je pense pas qu'on peut dire que le vaccin d'AstraZeneca devrait être mis de côté d'emblée. Je pense que c'est là où les gens ont un choix à faire. Est-ce qu'ils veulent prendre le vaccin d'AstraZeneca et se protéger maintenant?
Should they take the AstraZeneca vaccine and be protected right away or wait for a while to receive another vaccine?
Je dois rappeler qu'il y a eu plusieurs situations au Canada où des communautés qui étaient relativement épargnées ou complètement épargnées par la COVID-19 ont vu à l'intérieur d'une semaine ou 2 des éclosions extrêmement importantes survenir.
themselves with the COVID outbreak. And once there's an outbreak, if the vaccination rate is low in the community, the vaccine could be widely transmitted. And for people to develop immunity, it could take 4 to 6 weeks, and COVID would have had time to make people very sick and cause other sorts of damage. The fact that there's no COVID in a community or region is no guarantee that there will be no outbreak in the coming weeks. So the AstraZeneca vaccine remains a good option. Now, our role is to approve products, make information available. It's up to people to take their own decisions. So long as it's an informed decision. In our opinion, it's not a bad decision to consider the AstraZeneca vaccine, even in situations where the COVID rate is low. People should take informed decisions. Let me clarify the context. We are talking of one case out of 100,000 cases where we have thrombosis associated with low platelets. So the risk is 1 out of 100,000. Now, the risk of dying from a car accident 25 times that. Many people die from car accidents every year. So if we compare that, so there's a 25% lower chance of dying from the AstraZeneca vaccine than dying from a car accident in Canada. So we need to look at the risks. When we take the risk in isolation, it seems horrible because people think they may die. But if everything is compared to other risks that we are exposed to every day, well, the risk of COVID-19 has a lot of unforeseens when it comes to what may happen
il y a un petit peu d'imprévisibilité dans le fond à la fréquence de la maladie dans les communautés, même dans les semaines à venir dans les communautés, il n'y en a pas. Donc,
en prenant tout ça en compte, je pense que, comme je vous expliquais,
l'alternative du vaccin d'AstraZeneca reste intéressante. Comme on l'a mentionné, si on regarde en Grande-Bretagne, ça a été utilisé de façon large à travers le pays, 22 millions de doses. Cela a permis, de contrôler la pandémie de la COVID-19 et de retourner à une vie plus normale.
And they were able to go back to normal life.
Je sais que votre collègue en a parlé en anglais.
Follow-up. I know your colleague talked about it in English, but I would like you to come back to that. The issue of the second dose, particularly for those who received the first AstraZeneca vaccine dose. Do you think it's risky for them to go take a second AstraZeneca dose, or should they take another vaccine as a second dose?
Certainement.
What's your opinion?
Alors, les données sont plus limitées quant au
The data we have is limited when it comes to the adverse events
pour la deuxième dose
associated with second use of the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Qui ont été colligés en Grande-Bretagne,
looking at the database that was prepared in Great Britain and the EU,
des effets désirables rares, des caillots très spécifiques,
the adverse events, the rate of blood clot is about 1 out of 1 million.
Des effets indésirables sévères suite à la première dose, une
People
allergie
had severe side effects after the first dose.
Pas considérer prendre la deuxième
Those who had severe side effects should not consider taking the second dose. But if they did not have any serious side effects after taking the first dose, then the second dose should be considered. As I said before, the risk remains, but it doesn't seem to be higher when people take the second dose. The benefit of the second dose is that it ensures long-term immunity, particularly since for the AstraZeneca vaccine, we have excellent long-term immunity if the second dose is taken 12 12 weeks after the first. So when you look at the protection it offers against COVID-19, so the second dose AstraZeneca vaccine will give people a longer-term protection and there's a lower risk of adverse events and will help people fight COVID-19. So it remains an option to be considered, of course.
Merci, Dr. Bertillon. We have
Thank you,
time for
Dr.
one last
Bertillon.
question. Dernière question, opérateur.
Merci, thank you. And the last question is from Tonda McCharles of the Toronto Star. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi, Dr. Sharma, it seems to me that Health Canada is the first regulatory authority to approve the 12 to 15-year-old cohort for Pfizer. Is that correct, or has another authority actually approved it to date? And can you give us a detail actually on when did you approve it? It was in the last 24 hours, and when you actually expect it to be made available to that age group?
So yes, from our understanding, we are the first in the world to authorize Pfizer for ages 12 to 15. The U.S. FDA also has the same submission under review, as does the UK MHRA, and the European Medicines Agency will be reviewing it as well. So yes, we are the first. And basically with the authorization, it now can be used for this age group. So there's nothing else that needs to be done for it to be used. It is the same dose. So it's the same vaccine, it's the same dose, and it's the same dosing regimen as is already authorized for adults. So that can happen at any point in time. Just to note also that, there are some provinces that have already provided some vaccine to this age group if they were children that were at high risk. So that was done off-label, which is absolutely within their purview. So we do have some children in Canada that have already received a vaccine dose, but basically the authorization was signed off this morning, and that was when it's officially authorized, and all of the information is available on the website with respect to the information that we looked at. There's what we call a regulatory decision summary that we published that outlines at a high level the evidence that we looked at and the decision that was made. So all of that's publicly available, along with the Canadian product monograph that has information for healthcare practitioners and for Canadians around everything that goes into the indications and the warnings, the information that we've looked at as well. So that's all available.
Thanks. And I'm curious to get an update from you on Novavax, which you have not mentioned of late. So that was supposed to, I think you were expecting information on that last month. But if you could just give me a line on the Novavax update. But I just, on everything you've been asked here today and all the confusing messaging that we've been hearing over the last couple of days from various medical advisors to and within the government, I haven't heard anyone say that if there's such, if the mRNA vaccines are better, they don't have that low risk you're talking about of the blood clot, then why aren't none of you recommending them and prioritizing them for essential workers in high-risk communities? Why are you telling them you should take the crappy vaccine sooner instead of taking the gold standard vaccine that you suggest is out there?
So the first part on Novavax. So Novavax, we have two vaccines currently under review. One is the Novavax vaccine, and the other one is the Medicago vaccine. For Novavax, you're right, we were expecting some clinical trial information to come in as early as at the end of last month or early this month, but we were notified by Novavax that there were some delays in providing the clinical trial information. So we are maybe expecting that by the end of May or early June, but it really depends on when they finish assessing the trials and they're ready to submit. In addition, for Novavax, there's still significant manufacturing information that we've not yet received. So we've received a lot of the preclinical information, the laboratory piece. There's still significant amounts of clinical information that we are expecting to receive, and on the manufacturing side. So it really will depend on the data. And then with respect to the use of the vaccines, and how they are distributed and rolled out, each vaccine will have its advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages of the viral vector vaccine is its ability to be stored in refrigerator temperatures, so it doesn't have to be frozen. With the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that we haven't yet distributed, it is a one-dose vaccine, so that might be used for certain populations where it's difficult to administer the second dose. So you really have to look at all of those considerations, and that's what the provinces and territories look at when they are deciding where to offer what vaccines. Now, we know that for the mRNA vaccines, part of the challenges around the distribution was the temperature at which they have to be stored. We have been told by Pfizer that we're expecting additional information to be able to lower that time in terms of, increase the time at lower temperature that they can be stored. So that might give us some flexibility as well. But it really depends on which vaccines that you have, which populations are most at risk of getting COVID-19, so having the infection, and which ones are at most risk for being seriously ill with COVID-19. And that's really how the prioritization should be looked at. We know that in Canada, when we're looking at the volumes of vaccines that are coming in, certainly the Pfizer vaccine is the one that is really going to be the backbone for the immunization programs here in Canada, just because it's the most volume. So, you have to look at the supply, you have to look at what you know about the vaccines, what the characteristics are about the vaccines, and then the provinces and territories and the local regional health authorities need to see how they can both best get them administered. And, the overall goal is the same, regardless of where we are, is to get as many people vaccinated as soon as possible. And that's what will serve us best as individuals, as families, as communities, and as a country.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. That will be all for today's technical briefing. C'est ce qui met fin au briefing technique pour aujourd'hui. Bonne journée.